Ladies and gentlemen, this Red Gaming Typical video, we're going to be discussing the best components for your money. It is mid-October 2013, and of course we're looking at a decent PC gaming rig. Now, all of the components listed are also in the description, but I would advise you listening to the video because there are some choices you need to make, which I go into some detail on here that are not in the description. So this budget is £525 or $652, all the way up to about £650 or $850. These do give you some decisions. So for example, you can choose if you want an SSD and so on. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump in. Now at this price range, I would personally recommend AMD CPUs. You can get black editions of these CPUs, which means you can overclock them. So, first things first, let's discuss the first CPU with option 1, that is the AMD FX 6300. That is 90 Great British Pounds or 120 US dollars. That sucker features basically a 6-core processor and it's fairly overclockable. For the needs of most gamers, especially considering that most games now are becoming GPU bound, and especially because we're looking at multiple titles in the future that are going to work using as many cores as possible, this is a really nice processor. If you have a little bit more cash in your pocket and you fancy splurging out, you could also get the AMD FX 8320. Once again, if you don't hear the name, you can just click on the link in the description. It has everything there, so don't need to worry about it. And that's 115 or 153 depending on pounds or dollars. Now that will actually feature 4 modules and 2 processing cores per module, so that's 8 hardware threads. This sucker is actually really powerful. It's slightly slower than the AMD FX 8350, but they're pretty much on exactly the same core. The only difference is their speed bend. Now you can actually overclock these pretty well. I have not included a second heatsink fan or an alternative heatsink and fan in these prices. You can by all means just do a little bit of research for yourself and make the decision. If I had the money, honestly speaking, I would try to get the 8320 because it's going to be a little bit faster for media and so on, and it also has the benefit of games in the future, if they do become extremely wide and they take advantage of multi cores, then you're covered for the future. But either one of these two CPUs is a pretty good buy. RAM, in my opinion, there's only one real option, and that's 8 gigs now. You could by all means go for a 16 gigabyte solution in the future, but for right now, for the foreseeable future, 8 gigs is going to be okay. Maybe in a couple of years when the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One start taking over, you could probably justify the extra cached layout. But for our budgets for this video, I would recommend the Kingston HyperX Blue, that is BLU. That's available for 62 or 57 depending on pounds and dollars. 8 gigs is pretty damn good and should suffice, honestly speaking. For motherboard, you've got 2 options. One, the slightly cheaper one, is the MSI 970A-G46. Once again, just to point out, all of these are in the description. And that's 65 or 70 depending on pounds and dollars. Now, that's a pretty good board. It does support Crossfire, and it also supports SLI, which is a pretty nice combination. However, if you've got a bit more cash and you fancy a quad SLI or quad Crossfire down the line, you could go with the ASRock 990FX Extreme 3 board, and that's 79 or 110. Honestly speaking, I would take a look at both boards and figure out if you need the extra features of the Extreme 3. I think for most people who are building a standard gaming rig, you don't need it, and I'd say that the cheaper board is going to be absolutely fine and dandy. Next, the GPU. I've gone with 2 options here. The first is the GTX 760. That's a very powerful graphics card indeed, and at $180 or $240, it's quite a hefty portion of the budget. You've also got the AMD Radeon R9 280X. That's £240 or $310. Now, for the most part, the GTX 760 is most likely going to be enough for pretty much any modern game, and is more than likely sufficient to run titles like, say, Battlefield 4 and so on at 1080p without too much trouble. It's also worth noting that the slightly, a lot more expensive card, the R9 280X, which is $240 or $310, is actually a really good buy. It's not, strictly speaking, a new card. It's not like the 290 or the 290X. This is a rebadge of the 709 series or the 7000 series, so in other words, it's still based on the graphics core Next architecture. However, it still should be more than sufficient to run pretty much any title out there. Honestly speaking, if you're a Battlefield fan, I would highly recommend an AMD card for one major reason, and that's Mantle. We know that Battlefield 4 is going to run extremely well with Mantle because it's a low-level API that's being confirmed for Battlefield 4, and it will only work so far with AMD cards, so you're going to get high performance. On the other hand, most NVIDIA cards are going to easily be able to run the game anyway, so they probably wouldn't need Mantle. If I had the extra cash, I would go with the R9, simply because it's a more powerful card, it will last you longer, and you'll be able to run with higher levels of anti-aliasing and that kind of thing. So hard drive. Probably the best bang for proverbial buck would be the Western Digital Blue 1 terabyte. 1 terabyte seems to be about the sweet spot in terms of price versus what you're actually getting. It's about £48 or $65 US. Obviously, the prices of all of these components fluctuates. So tomorrow it could be, 43 or it could be £52, for example. Now, you can get an SSD if you so wish. I'm not going to give you a recommendation for an SSD because there are so many different types, and it really depends on exactly what you're looking for in terms of, do you want it just for the operating system, do you want it for the games as well? But you have definitely got some money there aside if you wish. I'm similarly not going to give you an idea for the case. Not because I'm being mean, but because cases, everyone has different looks and wishes. Some people don't really give a crap about what the case looks like. Other people love cases and they need to make sure it looks aesthetically pleasing. Other people are more worried about the size. Other people are more worried about the noise. So I just recommend that you look for a case in about your budget range and then just make a decision based upon that. For the PSU, however, I would recommend a nice, very decently performing Antec VP450. That's £40 or dollars, so exactly the same if you're paying in dollars or pounds on that one, which is a bit of a sad face. And you've also got the Antec VP550. That's obviously got a bit more wattage. Now, if you need a bit more power because you're going with a higher end graphics card, you could well go with the 550. I would recommend you check out the requirements based on the GPU and so on you've got. I would imagine the 450, however, would probably do you okay, but if you're planning to load the machine down with tons of fans and possibly multiple hard drives in the not too distant future, then more power is never a bad thing. I would recommend you do not scrimp and save on a PSU, however, because if they go bang, you're not going to be a happy camper. Once again, that's £55 or about $60. Once again, obviously the prices fluctuate, but I'm going with what's currently available on Amazon and a couple of other websites as well. I just kind of grabbed the median. Next, optical drive. You could go with a cheap DVD writer, which honestly is probably what I would do at this point. They're basically free. I mean, most likely you probably got one in an old PC anyway, but if you don't, you're looking at about 10 to 20, depending on just how snazzy you go. I'd personally go with the dirt cheap OEM drive and not really give a crap if it lasts you 2 years. Who cares? It's, by that point, Blu-ray writers would have become so cheap. Or there's always the option of either a Blu-ray reader or writer. Obviously, that's going to cost a little bit more cash. I've not bothered to give you recommendations of that, not because I'm lazy, just because there's so many different options. I'll be here all day trying to price them up for you. So I would recommend that you do a little bit of research and just figure out which one you want. Personally, I would just say, unless you really need to burn Blu-rays, that a simple reader will probably be okay. But to be honest with you, I don't even use optical media like 99% of the time anyway, so I just typically stick with a DVD. DVD writer is good just to quickly, shuffle files about if you ever need to in an emergency, but other than that, internet connections and all. So what did I end up with? Well, for option 1, which of course had the FX 6300, the MSI 970, the GTX 760, the hard drive, and blah 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 blah. You're looking at 525 Great British Pounds, or $652 for option 2, which assumes you're going for all of the expensive parts. By all means, you could still have the cheaper motherboard and go with the FX 8320, for example. But that would run you 651 with one SSD with no Blu-ray, or 850 if you're paying in dollars with one SSD and once again no Blu-ray. You could easily, however, spend that slightly something different. Another alternative option would be the AMD FX 8350, which is a very good CPU indeed, and has a little bit more overclockable performance, shall we say. It seems to overclock a little bit higher, maybe about another 200 to 300, maybe even 400 megahertz. Or you could splurge on something like a second physical hard drive, or you could splurge on something completely different. It's up to you. But either way, for that price, you've got a good base solid system. Obviously, keyboard and mouse, up to you entirely. They're very personal decisions. So once again, just to point out, the links there, if you want to have a look, it'll give you all of the different options, and it's just easy to kind of click and navigate your way through. So hopefully that will solve things. Once again, if something moves in the next couple of months in the market, I'll make another video to inform you guys. I'm probably going to release another video as well, which is going to be dealing with the more expensive budgets, like £1,000 to slash, I don't know, like $1,200, $1,300 or something as well. And I'll try and do multiple price options on that as well. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.